Greetings to one and all gathered here to attend the sixth session of Social Work Skill Development Series conducted as a part of Observing Child Safety Week, organized by Department of Social Work of St. Albert's College Autonomous Ernakulam in association with Childline Kochi and CABS. To broaden our vision more on the subject, challenges of education in context of National Educational Policy 2020, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Father Joy James S.J., Vice President of Indian Social Institute, Bangalore, Secretary of Jesuit Higher Education in South Asia. I'd also like to welcome all our faculty members as well as all the participants. We truly appreciate the participation of everyone gathered here. Let's initiate the session by seeking the blessings from Almighty. So I welcome Merle Johnson for the prayer song.
നന്മരൂപിയായ ദൈവമേ നിനക്ക് വന്ദനം. സ്നേഹരൂപിയായ ദൈവമേ നിനക്ക് വന്ദനം. ബുദ്ധിയും വിശുദ്ധിയും സ്വഭാവശുദ്ധിയും ഭക്തിയും വിവേകവും തരണമേ ജനായിതേ. നന്മരൂപിയായ ദൈവമേ നിനക്ക് വന്ദനം. സ്നേഹരൂപിയായ ദൈവമേ നിനക്ക് വന്ദനം. ഈ കലാലയം നമുക്ക് നിത്യവും പവിത്രത എത്രയും അനഗ്നമായി സേവമായി സഹിക്കുന്നു. നന്മരൂപിയായ ദൈവമേ നിനക്ക് വന്ദനം. സ്നേഹരൂപിയായ ദൈവമേ നിനക്ക് വന്ദനം.
Thank you, Merle. Next, I welcome Grace Jutsi for delivering the welcome address.
Thank you, Adara. Good evening, everyone. Today we have gathered here for the fifth webinar of Child Safety Week, Challenges of Education in Context of National Educational Policy, organized by the Department of Social Work, St. Albert's College Autonomous, Ernakulam, in association with Childline Safety and CAPS under the Social Work Skill Development Series. It's my immense pleasure to welcome each and everyone present here to this program. Today, we have with us as the speaker of the session, Father Joyce James S.J. It's my honor to introduce and welcome him. He worked as a professor of social work at Loyola College of Social Sciences, Trivandrum, for 20 years and was a former chairman of Child Welfare Committee of Trivandrum District. He served as a Kerala Jesuit Provincial from 2003 to 2009 and also served as rector as well as manager of Loyola College Trivandrum for 11 years. Currently, he is the Vice President of Indian Social Institute, Bangalore, and Secretary of Jesuit Higher Education in South Asia. Sir, we are really blessed and happy to have you here with us. And on the behalf of our whole college, I cordially welcome you to this session. Next, I would like to welcome Father Jolly John Odatakal, Head of the Department of Social Work, St. Albert's College, to this event. I also welcome all the faculty members present in this session, along with all the participants gathered here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jutsi. Now let's head straight in the session. For that, I welcome Father Joy S.J. Over to you, Father.
Good evening, dear friends, dear Father Jolie, and all the faculty members, and my dear students. I know that you have been involved in this webinar these days in the context of the child rights, particularly on the Anti-Child Labor Day, which we celebrated on the 12th. Now, the rights of children is a new concept, although it has been announced by the United Nations in 1989. People are yet to get to the comprehensive understanding of these rights. The reason is, by and large, people see the perspective of people dealing with the children and women is out of charity. All these laws and declarations are not based on charity or welfare, but it's based on rights and justice. Therefore, unless people change the perspective, understanding of the whole concept of child rights, it may take some more time. Despite all these laws we have in our country, number of child abuse is increasing, particularly child sexual abuse. After the POCSO Act, it has become mandatory for the people officials to report. Therefore, some more cases are coming. Still, we think that at least 50% of cases are not reported. Therefore, we do not know really the extent of the issues. And these days, we are going through a very difficult time. It's an unprecedented experience because of the COVID. And almost 15 years, we are locked down. Most of us have spent most of the time at home. Rarely we come out. And many lost their jobs. Education institutions are closed. Places of worship are closed. And many migrants, particularly doing a lot of work, especially the menial work, have gone back home because of the poverty. And almost 900 people have died last year in April, May, while they were walking back to their own native places. So it is a very sad situation for us. But there are also some blessings in this disguise. This is called a blessing in disguise, meaning to say that we have experienced something different. First of all, this we have become familiar with this online platform, which we were not using it at all. So technology has come, but we were not familiarized with this technology. And this time, this last 15 months, we are forced to familiarize, and we are happy at that level. We can have international webinars, international conferences. We can deal with anybody in the world today. And we can also know what is happening in the world immediately. These are the blessings. Also, this COVID has taught us certain lessons. Number one lesson is that science cannot solve all the problems. Till recently, we were thinking that science can prove everything and solve everything. That concept has been shattered. Even the scientists became frightened of the issue of COVID and its ramifications. Second insight that we got was the money and wealth can give us security. That concept also has been shattered. COVID did not have any discrimination between the rich and the poor. In fact, more rich people have been affected than the poor themselves. Probably they have a natural immunity in terms of the death. If you look at, it was not the poor that died, the middle class, upper middle class, and the rich. Also, we have experienced a global solidarity. First time that people were themselves, countries were for themselves. Now they thought that we need to develop an international solidarity, concerned of the poor. Particularly, we social workers are been talking about that time immemorial. But now we have realized that it has come true to some extent. The countries are discussing about how to help the other. Also, there was a call to return to nature. We have a realization that we have plundered the earth, our mother earth, and destroyed. Therefore, the nature will take it back, take it on us. Therefore, we need to protect the nature, preserve the earth in terms of water, air, and we have had a deep deforestation. We need to cultivate and nurture this earth. These are the insights we had. Also, we had an insight about the simplicity of life. We have learned last 15 months we can live with a fewer things. Of course, in the time of commercialization or globalization, we used to have so many things. We bought many things which we never used or hardly used. But now we realize that we can live with fewer things, and that is also help us. Also, we learned about the value of family life. People are running, going through a rat race for money and protection and wealth. Today, we realize that it is important to spend time with the family. In a way, we were forced to be with the family, and we have learned a lot of things about ourselves. And this is also a blessing. In this context, I want to share with you some understanding about the NEP. During this COVID time, only we got the national education policy. Of course, we had a discussion earlier, and finally they submitted. Last July, the government has promulgated. And let me share with you some slides so that we have some understanding of that. Are you able to see the slide?
No, sir.
Not yet. Are you able to see now?
Yes, further.
Okay. Okay, the challenges of a national education policy 2020. So, first of all, let us look at the situation in the country. As you know, that Catholic Education Agency was one of the major agencies involved in the education for almost 200 years ago. And they have, as an organization, run about 787 higher education institutions, that is the universities and colleges, medical colleges, engineering colleges, etc. And number of universities in India at the moment are 1028, and number of colleges in India are 50,656. So that is the enormity. And these colleges, these 5,000 colleges, 50,000 colleges, and the universities cater to, say, about 23% of the people seeking for higher education. So that is the situation. And this national education policy, the government of India wants to enroll at least 50% of the people who are capable for higher education to be enrolled in higher education and get a degree or diploma. This is the understanding. Some of the salient features of the higher education, the national education policy, is this: forward-looking vision of national education policy based on constitutional values and citizens' responsibility. So we want to reaffirm the constitutional values because that is the backbone of our state, and also responsibility of people. Both have to be upheld. Secondly, restructuring higher education in India for more holistic and multidisciplinary approach with optimal learning environment and student support system. So the system has to be, the study has to be holistic and multidisciplinary. Today, mostly we have the unitary disciplinary approach, means science students study only science, arts students study only arts, medical students study only medical things like that. Now we want to have a wider exposure to different disciplines. At least to say about 10 to 20% of their studies will be multidisciplinary. The core subject will be about 40%. Third aspect is catalyzing the quality academic research with social bearing, equity, and inclusion of all classes of students. So the social inclusion is a social responsibility. We will not exclude anybody. That is understanding. Highly motivated and capable staff with effective governance and leadership. So teachers are not just to teach you the subject, but accompany you with a new understanding of governance and leadership. And finally, the salient feature is the curbing commercialization of education, reimagining vocational education, and promoting professional education. So only recently, last 10 years or 15 years, we started the professional education in our country, engineering, medicine, nursing, and things like that. Otherwise, very few people had the opportunity. And we don't have much of a vocational training because employability is an important aspect of our education now, particularly higher education. So new education policy says that we should start introducing the vocational education from the class 6 or 7. So that by the time they finish their higher secondary school, that is 12th standard, they should be able to do some employability in terms of part-time job while studying. All these are possibilities. And these are all very lofty ideas. It has been said by different commissions at different times. Kothari Commission has mentioned most of the things. International education system has taken up this type of things. But then India still has to find out the ways and means. Though the policy has come and we have not had the nitty-gritties, how to do it. There are about 18 commissions been appointed by central government to work it out. We need new legislations, new rules, new set of principles, and new set of activities to be enrolled in. But yet we also have some concern. What are the concerns? Number one, no mention of the minority education right in the NEP. And as you know that the Constitution gives Article 29 and 30 for the minorities, religious and language minorities, cultural minorities, to have their own education system of their choice. But no mention of that in this new policy. Under constitutional values, they talk about constitutional values, but secularism is completely omitted. There is no single time it was mentioned about secularism to be promoted. Secularism is not anti-religious in our Indian context. Of course, secularism, when the word came from the context of French Revolution, then it was militantly anti-religious. So the religious people have always a fear of secularism. But Indian secularism is not anti-religious. It is a respect for all religions and cultures. That's the meaning in the Constitution. Thirdly, reservation of SC and ST is not guaranteed in this policy. They said inclusion, but no mechanism is presented. As you know, then in Kerala, we have only 10% SC, scheduled caste, and 1% STs. But in education institution, they have 20% reservation. That is one of the reasons that in Kerala, unlike other states, scheduled caste and scheduled tribe students are able to come up in life. There are many IPS officers, IS officers, bureaucrats come because of the facility that the governments in Kerala and the communities have given that. And fourthly, there is a national testing agency will serve as an autonomous testing organization to conduct entrance exams for admissions. So there will be national testing for engineering, medicine, and everything. And it will be controlled by practically by central government. Then what happened is the federal system of the country, local realities, and the system of administration, that will not be respected. This is only a fear. And we have to see how it is going to work out. Because also we have heard that a lot of scams with regard to the entrance for engineering and medicine and all. How do we ensure that it will not happen when we have a national level testing for all sort of admissions? Other concerns are there will be teacher eligibility test for every level of teachers is mandated. So states are conducting it's fine. National eligibility test is conducted by UGC, and that is for the college teachers, that is fine. But even the kindergarten, if you have a national testing agency and conducting the eligibility test, what will happen to the people? How do we ensure that there will not be any malpractice? Six, the funding remains a major problem. The NEP says there will be 6% of the fund will be given for the education. But in fact, the government is reduced to this one only 2.7 so far. So 6% of GDP, will it be possible? Because government is borrowing money to run the welfare programs. So will it not be able to fund it for major changes that is envisaged? Because we need to have a new infrastructure, new methodology, new technology, and that will be very expensive. And seventhly, NEP will remove the present governing structure of education institutions. There shall be an overarching legislation that will supersede any contravening provisions of other earlier legislations and would provide for constitution, appointment, modalities of functioning, rules and regulations, and the roles and responsibilities of the Board of Governors. So there will be Board of Governors will run. That will be decided practically by the central government. How can it be possible? Because education in the concurrent list by the state and the central government, and there are minorities institutions, there are private management. All these are different stakeholders in our education system. So if it is going to be controlled centrally, there will be chaos and there will be problem. So these are the concerns which you have to see how it comes in terms of its legislation. Then we'll have to see it and study it. Right now, it is not clear. Now, when we talk about education, higher education particularly, we have to start from the reality as which we are in. What are the reality that challenges? One is the abject poverty. Of course, in Kerala, we have only less than 10% of the poor, really abject poor. In 1993, we had almost 37%. Because of our self-help group, Kudumbasri, and working with the NGOs, all these have worked in a very positive manner, reduce the abject poverty. But still, we have people with poor people in the country. And of course, the percentage of poor at the national level will be much higher. And we are faced with injustice. Every sector we find justice and corruption. And how do we deal with that? Discrimination is rampant in the base of caste and the class. Suppression of freedom. And the backbone of our democracy is freedom, the freedom of expression. It is enshrined in the Constitution as a fundamental right. But of late, we find with the new legislations coming, the professors cannot express their freedom. And in their ideas, students cannot do. And they have been arrested under various laws, draconian laws. Therefore, as the other day, you have heard that, High Court of Delhi has said that the freedom of expression is important. The professors have right to express because that's where the new ideas come, new challenges come, the dialectics come. But if you suppress, there will be only totalitarianism. So that cannot be allowed in a democratic world. Then the violence, all sort of violence, political violence, religious violence, particularly violence against women and children. And we are experiencing that. Then also we have fundamentalism. So in English, we have one word, religious fundamentalism. Madamaulika. That's the only word that we use. But when you use in Malayalam, there is a different nuances. Madamaulika Madam എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാല് ഓരോ മതവും ആ മതത്തിന്റെ മൂലങ്ങളിലേക്ക് റൂട്ടിലേക്ക് പോവുക. That is a good thing because every religion is talking about the concern for the other, brotherhood, universal health, Vasudeva Kudumbakam. So all these are different type of concept that we are one family and one brotherhood, one sisterhood. But that is the Mada Maulikavadam in the right sense of the word. But also there is a word that is we use that Mada Tivravadam, which means my religion is better than your religion. Therefore, people will constantly fight with each other to understand and to prove and things like that. That creates chaos and problems and conflicts. And third nuance of this word is Mada Tivravadam, which means എൻ്റെ മതത്തിൽ അല്ലാത്തവർക്ക് ഈ നാട്ടിൽ ജീവിക്കാൻ അവകാശമില്ല എന്നൊരു സ്റ്റേറ്റ്മെന്റ്. So what will happen to the others? Particularly minority religion. India is known as a cradle of religion. We have respect all religions and cultures in our country. We always respected and supported. Of late, the religion is coupled, mixed with the politics. Wherever religion is mixed with politics, we always had problems in the world. There will be a lot of atrocities and chaos. And that's what we are facing. Therefore, we as citizens of a country and democratic people, we need to understand how we help one another, how to respect individuals despite, without any discrimination. This is very important for us. Also, what is the future of education in our country? We have to look at that. നമ്മുടെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തിന്റെ ഭാവി എന്താണ്? First thing is it will be blended model. Meaning to say, നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് ക്ലാസ് റൂമിൽ ഇരുന്ന് പഠിക്കുന്ന പോലെ മുഴുവൻ പഠനം ഉണ്ടാവില്ല. That new education policy has given a lot of opportunities. And the other day, UGC has given a guideline for the universities and the colleges. That will be only 60% classroom teaching, 40% will be online teaching. And during the last year, the lockdown, we have experienced this, online teaching. How many percentage of people have been able to attend? Kerala's situation is still better, but they say even the school system, 30% have no access. Either they have no electricity, there is no power, or no gadgets, and they don't have the the expertise. So what would happen to the 30 to 40% of the poor people in our country with regard to their education if the blended model online teaching is introduced? This is a concern. But that is going to be the model. We have to see how we can orient them, how to give them this facility. That is very important. Second aspect is create a global, virtual, immersive learning environment. What is the global? We are working in a local situation, but we should have a global perspective. An Indian citizen or Keralite should be able to go any part of the world. We are lucky. Many of our Keralites are outside working. That's why our economy is, working on. If all the Keralites staying outside come back, we will have a real chaos because there will not be enough place for them to stay, and the economy will go in shambles. So therefore, we need to create global citizens. That is an important thing. Then we need to have virtual learning. We don't have the reality consciousness all the time because we have to have a virtual situation to be created because we cannot have exposure to everything in the world. What is happening in Niagara or what is happening in Europe, America, Africa, Latin America, all this today we can come in the fingertips. That's a virtual learning. Then immersive learning means we need to have exposure. If you want to know about poverty, if you want to know the unemployment, if you want to know the malnutrition, we need to have a direct face-to-face experience. That's called immersive learning. So we have a reality. We only learn the reality from the books and the magazines and maybe visually through the audiovisual means. But we need to have a direct physical face-to-face reality that will touch our heart and our mind and our soul. This is very important. Third aspect of our education will be promoting human dignity and gender equality. Human dignity is an important concern for us. Without human dignity, you cannot really survive because that is a hallmark of a culture and a character. And gender equality, we all talk about gender equality in our country, but yet we don't experience gender equality. Fortunately, in Kerala, that we have the girls, have more girls studying in higher education in terms of number. But if you look at from the total population, for every 1,000 male, we have 1,086 female. But this is a story of old people. From 1986 onwards, we have almost 13,000 more boys are being born every year in our country. അപ്പോൾ കഴിഞ്ഞൊരു 30 കൊല്ലമായിട്ട് കേരളത്തിലെ ആൺകുട്ടികളാണ് കൂടുതൽ ജനിക്കുന്നത് എന്നത് വളരെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്. So there will be this gender imbalance will take place within a few years. ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ നമ്പറിൽ സ്ത്രീകൾ കൂടുതലാണ്. കാരണം എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ the women will live more than 10, 12, 15 years than men. So outlive them. So that is our reason. അപ്പോൾ പ്രായമായ സ്ത്രീകളുടെ എണ്ണം വളരെ കൂടുതലാണ് നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യത്ത്. പ്രായമുള്ള ആളുകളുടെ എണ്ണം പൊതുവെ കൂടുതലാണ്. Almost it will reach 20% by next year. അപ്പോൾ 20% ആളുകളും റിട്ടയർഡ് ആളുകളാണെങ്കിൽ we have to take care of them. And what is their human dignity? And how do you look at the gender equality even at that age? Not only from the childhood, but in the entire nation. Then effective use of technology for learning. This is an important thing. You cannot avoid any more technology. We have to learn new ways, new understanding, how it affects. How do we relate to the technology? Not only the online classes, but how to conduct the group discussion, how to present papers, how to interact with each other, how to write assignments, how to evaluate people. The exam system is going to be over. We will not have a written exam after a few years anymore. And each class, each session will be evaluated automatically. And through the technology gives us. So the technology become more intelligent than a human being. It looks like that, no? Because human intelligence is behind this technology, definitely. But it is an average individual's intelligence will be lesser than the technological innovations. So creativity, innovations in terms of technology is going to be pervade, and we have to really cope up with that. And finally, we have to have a holistic development of students and teachers. It is not the cognitive development, intellectual development. What about the emotional development? What about the social development? What about the spiritual development? What gives you the freedom, understanding that every human being is my brother and sister? If something happens, if a calamity happens, I have a responsibility to amend that, to help them. How do we get this? It's coming from a social responsibility or spiritual responsibility. So all these are to be worked out together in terms of bringing new syllabus, new method, new approach, new pedagogy, and that will be our future. So in this context, I want to share with you some strategies for higher education in India, particularly in Kerala. So this is basically for the teachers and the organizers and the management and the principals. First of all, we must stress on student-centered approach with holistic development affecting the cognitive, affective, and behavioral dimension of the students. So human beings, when you talk about personality, it is not the intelligence alone. It is also affective dimension, the feeling dimension, the emotions dimension, and the behavior, how you behave. Culture to cultural behavior may change. There may be certain behavior will be acceptable, non-acceptable. So this is a desirable, non-desirable. Therefore, we need to really inculcate and a very close interaction with the cultures. And therefore, we need to look at the cognitive level, emotional level, and behavior level. This is a very important thing for our new education. Second aspect is we must promote awareness. It is not information, it is not knowledge, awareness, which is a critical thinking among the students along with imparting knowledge and skill. Today, the education gives you knowledge and your knowledge is tested. We also have the practical skills in terms of mostly technical skills, but also we need to have life skills, social skills, dealing with emotions, dealing with empathy, dealing with our own understanding, interpersonal relationship, effective communication. These are all skills that we need to learn. Along with that, we also have a critical thinking. Critical thinking is not criticizing, to have a deeper insight into what is happening to me at my thinking level, my feeling level, my behavior level, my attitude level, and my value level. All these five aspects are to be looked together. It's all encompassing experience. That's called awareness. Awareness is not just information, not mere knowledge, not even ideas, not even ideology. It goes beyond all this. Because what I said is knowledge, ideology, and all is a cognitive. But it affects your thinking level, it affects your feeling level, it affects your behavior level, and your value level, your attitude level. All these aspects to be, it's all comprehensive, all encompassing. That's important. And third aspect is set up research and training centers for training teachers, for motivation and mentoring. So teachers are not just teachers imparting knowledge and skills. Also, they are mentors. They accompany the students. Why accompanying? Because it's only in close contact they will be able to evaluate the performance, not writing an exam or giving a marks at the end of the exam, though that type will go. So therefore, an accompaniment is an important aspect, a new role that teachers have to play, which needs a very good training and research, because a lot of material is available already, but we need to tailor-made in our own context, and therefore we need training centers and research centers. Also, we have to study the Indian freedom struggle, because we are Indians. We have gone through, our forefathers have gone a deeper struggle in life, and Indian constitution should be made mandatory for all students at undergraduate level. Today, only those who study civics or some extent history learn that. Nobody else. Or political science. But others do not know much about the constitution. It's not only for the lawyers, but also for every citizen. So there should be a part of our syllabus. Then service learning and community engagement should be part of the curricula. Service learning means we learn from the people, from the situations. We must be able to observe. We must be able to analyze. We must be able to understand. We must be able to proact, work with that, and evaluate. It's an ongoing process. It's called praxis. Action, reflection, action. It goes on. So we have a new insight about ourselves, new insight about the social reality, and we also learn new paradigm, new methods, new models to create a new environment. This is very important. And also we have the multi-religious, pluricultural context in India. That should reflect in our syllabus. So we have many different religions, and they have different ethos and different cultures. All these have to be taken very seriously into the Indian context, and we must be able to reflect, and this should be part of our syllabus. And psychological and career counseling should be provided in college campuses. So it is counseling is not for people who are sick. That is a misunderstanding. Many people don't go to counselor because I am all right. Counseling is meant for normal people. Whereas when I am abnormal or I am neurotic, or mentally sick, then you go for a psychotherapy and psychiatric treatment. That is a medical treatment. Doctors give medicines. That's what. That's only when I am not able to understand what is happening. I behave in an abnormal manner, then it's okay. But normal people, we are otherwise normal. Certain situations we will not be able to handle by ourselves. There are difficulties, some situation of a failure or wrong choice of a subject or a misunderstanding with a professor or a classmate or a friend or we meet with an accident. All these situations gives a certain crisis in our life. Therefore, we need a support system that is called counseling, psychological. Counseling can be there, but then career counseling also. People should choose along with their understanding of their aptitude and interest. If you have an aptitude and interest on a particular area, you will flourish. Suppose you have only one aptitude, no interest, still you can survive. Or you don't have aptitude, but you have interest, then because of a struggle, you will survive. But suppose you don't have an aptitude or interest to study social work or medicine or nursing or that part engineering, you will collapse and you will meet with a serious crisis. So our success in life, happiness in life, very much depend on your ability, your aptitude, and secondly, or your own personal interest. Interest can be created, but aptitude is not able to, we will not be able to create. It is part of our nature. This can be tested. That's called the differential aptitude test, DAT. There are about 8 different types of aptitude can be studied, and we can give you the percentage. Therefore, we know this is the area that I should go. Then, innovative pedagogy and assessment should be used to achieve global standards. We need to go to the global standard in higher education. Right now, we don't have one institution, it can be at the international standard. If you look at the best 100 colleges or universities, we don't have a single one from India. But we can come to that because we have the professors working elsewhere. Many best universities have Indian professors. That's true. So that means you need an ambience, you need a research facility, you need a support system, and you need a political will. It is even now today the government controls the system. Also the industry control system, the market driven education is coming. Market is going to decide what type of the people they need. So therefore what will happen? The gap between the rich and the poor will be there. There is a bias for urban situation in our country. Urban bias it's called. We are betting on the urban situation. We are trying to develop the urban sector in our country, whether in Kerala and elsewhere. So what will happen? Rural people will be shunned. And in the country, we still have the 65% of the poor, the rural people, and only 35% are in the urban setting. So therefore, we, of course, fortunately in Kerala, we don't have a purely rural or purely urban, much different, very few places, but we call rural. If you travel from Kasaragod to Parashala and Trivandrum, you find on both sides people living and in institutions and trade centers, offices, all these are there. So we have, sort of, we're not segmented, but that is not the case with other places. Therefore, we need to develop that, global standards so that people will be capable of responding to any situation in the world. And also we need to have a gender balance. And the student support program should be enhanced. So there are students who may be weak in studies, may be poor in terms of financially, they will not be able to afford to go to institution that needs to pay very high fees. Therefore, we need to have some support system, even within the college, within the structure, within the university. And finally, we need to develop scholarships for the deserving students from the below poverty line. There are poor students, economically poor students. So therefore, we need to develop scholarship because country may not give, they should. But in fact, each institution can set up, say about 10% of their surplus for scholarship so that they can develop a scholarship fund and support them. We can approach the alumni associations of our institutions to support this and make some money so that they can be put in a fixed deposit and some percentage can be given to the students every year. And ultimately, what is the aim of our education? Our education should ultimately make us all fully human being and build up people who live in harmony and peace. Ultimately, our aim of our life is peace and happiness. If we do not have peace and happiness, what is the use of life? And we are struggling with life. And therefore, we should also set apart some time to interact with the human beings, understand the struggles of people, how to develop a empathetic understanding and support system, so that by giving and by protecting, by serving others, we will experience harmony and peace. This would be the ultimately that education. So education should help us to help others. And in social work, we say that, no? It's a profession to help people to help themselves. That is a professional done. But also in our personal life, we have to look at that level. How do we go out of ourselves? So educating people to be men and women for others, not for ourselves alone. I think I'll stop here. It's almost 50 minutes. So I will stop here. You can ask some questions and we can have some interaction.
Thank you, Father, for sharing your values with us. And also, the slide is really simple and explaining about the challenge of NEP, future of higher education, etc. So now it's the time for Q&A section. If participants have any questions, you can directly ask to Father by unmuting your mic or can type the questions in the chat box.
Either you can raise your hands or unmute and ask. Raise your in the the lower part you can see the raising hand. You just click there, then I can see. Then you can ask, unmute and ask your questions, or you put in the chat box. Then the organizers can tell me the question. Any clarification or your own ideas, or something that you want to contribute, add to that. Something if I did not make myself clear in some area, that you can also ask. This session is basically for an understanding and a philosophy of our education in the context of NEP, National Education Policy. Because we are going to be the beneficiaries of that in the coming years. Do you have any question or even your opinion? You can express your opinion also. Was it useful to you? Is there any challenging dimension is there? Don't be mere recipients. Because we have only one life. The God has given us life as a gift, which we never asked for it. So we got it as a gift. And what we make of our life is a gift back to this world. And that is our responsibility. So when we study social work or whatever we do, there is a responsibility that's called a social responsibility. And this social responsibility we must experience in our life. Then only we will be able to respond to the world and experience happiness and peace. That's the idea. Anybody wants to ask question? I put the hand. Raise your hand. I don't see anybody raising hands, which means what I said is it's very clear to everybody, or you are not interested in anything, so you don't want to ask anything. What is true? Is it that you understood okay, or you agree with me? If you disagree with me also, you can say. That is important for us. We need to have a debate, a discussion. Okay. Varghese, you please ask the question. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Please.
We were discussing about the first time thinking of the education policy.
Yes.
We have education policy in that that has become a right for the children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many times we have seen especially in Ernakulam side or in the metropolitan cities, the migratory workers children.
Yeah.
So we have the policy, but they don't have their own language. Schools are not available.
Okay.
Okay. Also, for example, they migrate from here to Tamil Nadu to Bombay to Gujarat. Then in that situation, what is the response? Any good response can be or I used to think that a common medium can be taken, but it is not a national language or a sectoral language. There are so many issues. So what about the future of those children the parents are migrating time-based. Different places.
Okay. Oh, it's a very good question. It is not only a national policy. We have a national law. The Right to Education Act is a law. And the law says if a parent would not allow the children below 14 years, that is between 6 and 14, now it will be 3 to 14, would not allow them to go for a formal education, these children can be taken by the state through the CWC. CWC as the authority, Child Welfare Committee of each district. And if the parents want their children back, they have to go to the court. So unfortunately for these migrants, there is no regular program except some NGOs. Some NGOs have started preschool classes and children, and these children at that age, they can learn any language. So it is not only their mother tongue, and children can learn 3-4 language in a colloquial manner. That is to be encouraged. So one of the needs of the social workers is that to encourage some NGOs to run some Balabadis exclusively for the migrant children. And the Kerala, we have about 44 lakhs of the migrants. Earlier, 20 years or 15 years ago, migrants used to come seasonal migrants. They come usually in the June, July time, in the monsoon time. They work in now paddy fields and other fields. And by September, October, they get rain in Tamil Nadu district, they go back. That was the situation. Now, Tamil Nadu people are not coming because the Tamil Nadu situation, financial situation, social situation is better than Kerala. So they don't come. Now we are getting people from West Bengal, Orissa, Bihar, and Jharkhand and places like that. And they all know Hindi by and large. Their local dialect is maybe Bhojpuri and all, but they know Hindi. So we can easily conduct a program for Hindi. If you to Ernakulam district, go to Perumbaur, everybody speaks Hindi now because they have learned Hindi and some even speak Bengali. So what I am saying is the language is an asset. What we need a political will. The government is financially not in a better position. See, when the government fails, only NGOs come. That is one of the things that is one of the areas that social workers have a great role to play. And this 42 lakhs of people some of them may not even go back. They started getting, settled down in Kerala, buying things because they get better salary than anywhere. West Bengal, they are getting 500 to 800 rupees. So therefore, they will come and stay here. They may go back only once in Saraswati Puja's time in October, November. So what we need is they will be integrated into Kerala society. This is going to happen, whether you like it or not. Therefore, how do you respect them? How do you... because many Malayalis exploit them also. That is true. Giving a small shed and asking them to pay 100 rupees per day and all, it's happening in Kerala. Therefore, what is the rights of these people? Not only children's rights, human rights, no? So we need to galvanize and create a culture and an ethos in our Kerala society to take up every child. എല്ലാ കുട്ടികൾക്കും സംരക്ഷണം കൊടുക്കാൻ നമ്മുടെ ആവശ്യമാണ്. അപ്പോൾ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം, ആരോഗ്യം, പരിസര ശുചീകരണം, വീട്, വസ്ത്രം ഇതെല്ലാം വേണം. എന്നാലേ നമുക്ക് അവരെ രക്ഷിക്കാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. കാരണം ഈ ചെറുപ്രായത്തിലാണ് നമ്മുടെ കോഗ്നിറ്റീവ് എബിലിറ്റി വളരുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ ചെറുപ്പത്തിൽ വേണ്ടത്ര പോഷകാഹാരം കിട്ടിയില്ലെങ്കിൽ they will not be able to study afterwards. Of course, we don't want to make everybody is a PhD or something, but we need to have people with the human dignity doing what else. So the labor, dignity of labor, ഏത് labor important ആണ്. ഇപ്പൊ നമുക്കറിയാം യൂറോപ്പിലും അമേരിക്കയിലൊക്കെ ചെന്ന് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ കക്കൂസ് കഴുകാൻ വരുന്ന ആളും പാന്റും കോട്ടും ടൈയും കെട്ടിയിട്ട് കാറിലാണ് വരുന്നത്. When they come, they change their dress and do, and there is no discrimination. So that's called a dignity. Every labor has a dignity. ലേബറിന്റെ അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിലല്ല നമ്മൾ ആളുകളെ തരം തരുന്നത്. ഇവിടെ എന്താ നമ്മൾ ധരിക്കുന്നത്? കല ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ആളെ വിളിക്കുന്നത് കൊശവൻ എന്നാണ്. അപ്പൊ നമുക്കൊരാൾ ദേഷ്യം വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ വീട്ടിലെ അപ്പനോ അമ്മയെ വിളിക്കുന്നത് കൊശവൻ എന്നാണ്. വാട്ട് ഇസ് ഹാപ്പൻ? So that dignity of that labor is been degraded. So we need to look at respect all type of artisans and help them, support them, and develop a culture. That's the only thing we can do. But in your place, if you find that some children are not going to school, you must immediately report to District Child Protection Unit, that is DCPU, or Child Welfare Committee, CWC. And fortunately, we have also Childline involved in this program. Childline is an agency who has brought in all these issues. കേരളത്തിൽ ചൈൽഡ് ലൈൻ തുടങ്ങിയത് 2000-ലാണ്. തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തിന് ആദ്യം തുടങ്ങിയത്, പിന്നെ കൊച്ചി, കാലിക്കറ്റ്, ഇപ്പൊ ഭാഗ്യവശാലും നമുക്ക് 14 ജില്ലയിലും ചൈൽഡ് ലൈൻ ഉണ്ട്. Child Line has done a fantastic work in Kerala. No government agency could do such work at that time. So Child Line has brought in a lot of cases, lot of issues, helped a lot of children, and that is a fantastic thing. It is a partnership with the NGOs and the government. It's a central government program supported by NGOs. We have about 35 NGOs working in Kerala along with the Childline. That's a fantastic work. So such models should be created. And ultimately, what is the role of the university or education? It is to create knowledge, and also to transfer knowledge. Transmission is also important, but more than that, its creation is important. Transmission can be done by the other people, but creation is important. So all of us have a duty to develop new models, new understanding, which needs a new pedagogy, new exposure, new analysis. That's where it should go. Okay. Any other question? Anybody else? Can you repeat the question? Somebody?
Father, I'll just read the question. 1 second. Okay. So, Father, the question is, what do you think about students studying subjects of their genuine interest instead of fixed common ones in their education years?
So we actually, what is going to happen is, in early childhood, there will not be any particular subject of physics, chemistry and all. Science, arts, literature, all these will be a general exposure will be given. So students have a choose and pick. Even a person studying engineering or medicine or a social work, only you will be able to study only 60% of that core subject. 20 to 30% will be studying something else. You can study yoga, you can study the religion, you can study the Ayurveda, whatever. You may not be a doctor, but you can study. This will be a sort of modular courses, modules. Then you can also drop out. New education policy says if you finish 1 year and you want to take a break, you can take a break. You get a you can get a certificate. If you finish 2 years of a degree, you get a diploma, and you can come back after 3 or 4 years. So it's called credit bank. It's a credit-based education, and when you finish a credit, it is in your bank, in your name. And whenever you want to restart an education, the 3rd year or 4th year, you still can do that, and you get money, and you get the degree. So that is the situation. So it will be 4-year degree and 1-year masters. So that would be the approach that we will have. So there is no restriction that way. The students will be allowed to study anything he wants or she wants. Of course, it will take 5 years. In your time, it may not be. So since you are studying now masters, within 1 year or 2 years, you will finish. But the future generation will have that. And that will be the challenge for us to equip them and to proact with them. That is right. Okay. Any other question? Yeah, one more.
Father, കേൾക്കാവോ?
കേൾക്കാം, പറയൂ.
നമ്മുടെ പുതിയ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, അത് ഒരുപക്ഷെ ഒരു 5-6 വർഷം മുമ്പ് തന്നെ ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടിയിരുന്ന ഒരു പോളിസി അല്ലായിരുന്നോ? അത് മാത്രമല്ല, ഞങ്ങളെ പോലുള്ളവർക്ക് ആ പോളിസിയുടെ ഒരു ഗുണം കിട്ടാൻ സാധ്യതയില്ലല്ലോ, കാരണം ഞങ്ങളിപ്പോ മാസ്റ്റേഴ്സ് കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ആക്കാറായി.
Yeah, but a new concept is coming, that is a lifelong learning now. It is not the degree പഠിച്ചോടി സംഗതി തീർന്നില്ലല്ലോ. നമുക്കത് 1968 കോത്താരി കമ്മീഷൻ ഈ പറഞ്ഞ കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു. പക്ഷെ what happened was we were still part of this affiliate system. അതായത് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയുടെ ബ്യൂറോക്രസിയിൽ കൂടെ കടന്നു പോകുക എന്നുള്ളതായിരുന്നു നമ്മുടെ ആളുകളുടെ ലക്ഷ്യം. അപ്പൊ കേരളത്തിൽ എന്താ സംഭവിച്ചത്? കേരളത്തിൽ ഈ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റികൾക്ക് ആർക്കും ഓട്ടോണമി വേണ്ടാന്ന രീതിയിലായി. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഓട്ടോണമസ് കോളേജുകൾ നമ്മൾ പ്രോത്സാഹിപ്പിക്കുന്നില്ല. ഓട്ടോണമി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താണ്? സിലബസ് ഉണ്ടാക്കാനും പരീക്ഷ നടത്താനും ഡിഗ്രി അവാർഡ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യമാണല്ലോ അൾട്ടിമേറ്റ്ലി. അപ്പൊ എന്ത് പറ്റും? നന്നായിട്ട് നടന്ന കോളേജുകളിൽ മാത്രമേ ആളുകൾ പോവുള്ളൂ. വൈ ഇന്ന് കേരളത്തിൽ തന്നെ കുട്ടികൾ ഈ ബാംഗ്ലൂരും ബോംബെയിലും കൽക്കട്ടയിലും ഒക്കെ പഠിക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത്? ബിക്കോസ് ദേ തിങ്ക് ദാറ്റ് their opportunity for the future will be better, no? അപ്പൊ പൈസ ഉള്ളവർക്ക് അത് പറ്റുള്ളൂ എന്നുള്ള ഒരു പ്രശ്നം നമുക്കുള്ളത്. കേരളത്തിൽ ഭാഗ്യവശാല് ഒരു 20 to 30% people can afford education anywhere. കാരണം ഗൾഫിലൊക്കെ ആരെങ്കിലുമൊക്കെ ജോലി ചെയ്യുന്നതുകൊണ്ട് നമുക്കൊരു 3-4 ലക്ഷമൊക്കെ രൂപ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. അപ്പൊ എന്തുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മളുടെ സ്ഥാപനങ്ങൾ അങ്ങനെ മുന്നോട്ട് പോകാത്തത്? പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ റീസൺ. നമ്മൾ ഈ ഐഡിയോളജി പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നോണ്ട് ഇപ്പൊ കമ്പ്യൂട്ടർ എന്ത് സംഭവിച്ചു? നമ്മളൊരു 20 കൊല്ലം പിറയിലായി. എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് കോളേജുകൾ എന്താ സംഭവിച്ചത്? തമിഴ്നാട്ടിലും ആന്ധ്രയിലും ഒക്കെ എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് കോളേജ്, കർണാടകയിലൊക്കെ എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് കോളേജ് നടത്തി. നമ്മുടെ കുട്ടികളൊക്കെ അവിടെ പോയി പഠിച്ച് പുറത്തുപോയി. കേരളത്തിലെ ആളുകൾ നമ്മൾ അങ്ങോട്ടും ഇങ്ങോട്ടും തെക്ക് കൊടുക്കുകയാണെന്നോ? ദിസ് ഇസ് വാട്ട് ഹാപ്പൻ. സോ വി കനോട്ട് ബ്ലെയിം എനിബഡി. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് അങ്ങനെ ചിന്തിക്കുന്ന ഒരു തലമുറ നമുക്ക് ഇല്ലാതെ പോയി. നമുക്ക് നമ്മുടെ സമൂഹത്തിൽ നമ്മൾക്ക് ഐഡിയോളജിയാണ് പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ടത്. ഇപ്പൊ ഞാൻ ഏത് പാർട്ടിയാണോ ആ പാർട്ടി പറയുന്നത് ശരി. നമ്മൾ ഏത് പാർട്ടിയിലായാലും അവർ പറയുന്നത് നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യത്തിന് നല്ലതല്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എത്തിക്കലി ഇൻകോൺഗ്രുവൻസ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അതിനെ ചോദ്യം ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഒരു കഴിവുണ്ടാവും. ആ കഴിവ് നമ്മൾ വളർത്തുന്നില്ല. ക്രിട്ടിക്കൽ തിങ്കിങ് നമ്മൾ അനുവദിക്കില്ല. സ്കൂളിൽ തന്നെ എന്താ ഒരു ചോദ്യം ചോദിച്ചാൽ ടീച്ചർ പറയും അവിടെ ഇരിക്കടാന്ന് പറയും. സോ വാട്ട് ഹാപ്പൻസ്? യു വിൽ നോട്ട് തിങ്ക്. സോ വാട്ട് വിൽ ഹാപ്പൻ ടു അസ്? വി വാണ്ട് ടു ലേൺ ബൈ ഹാർട്ട് ആൻഡ് റീപ്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ഇൻ ദ പരീക്ഷയ്ക്ക് കൊടുത്ത മാർക്ക് തങ്ങാം. ഇത്രേ ഉള്ളൂ. പേരൻസിനും അത് മതിയല്ലോ അല്ലേ? എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് മെഡിസിനും മാർക്കാണ് പ്രധാനം, അറിവല്ല. So there were a lot of problems. Though now we are now getting some freedom of experience, and we must express ourselves. So no, it is important that you will continue studies. You don't finish with your MA. You go for research, and you will have a new understanding. So that way we gain. Methodology is still there. Okay. Anybody else?
ഫാദർ അതിനോട് പറയാനുള്ളത്
Sure.
ഞാൻ പഠിച്ചത്
Unmute yourself. കേട്ടോ, ഉറക്കെ പറയൂ.
ഞാൻ പഠിച്ചത് ഡിഗ്രി SB കോളേജാ, ചങ്ങനാശ്ശേരി.
ഓക്കെ.
അപ്പോ ചങ്ങനാശ്ശേരി SB ഓട്ടോണോമസ് ആണ്. പക്ഷേ ഓട്ടോണോമസ് ആയിട്ട് പോലും നമുക്ക് സർട്ടിഫിക്കറ്റ് ഇഷ്യൂ ചെയ്യുന്നത് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയാണ്, MG ആണ്.
അതെ. അതെന്താ സംഭവിക്കുന്ന വെച്ചാല് നമ്മളുടെ കേരളത്തില് ഈ ഓട്ടോണമസ് കോളേജ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താന്നൊരു വ്യക്തത ആളുകൾക്കില്ല. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എന്തുകൊണ്ട് പ്രൊട്ടസ്റ്റ് നടത്തിക്കൂടാ? എനിക്ക് മനസ്സിലായി. നിങ്ങളുടെ കോളേജിൽ പാസ്സായ ഒരു 100-200 പേരില്ലേ? നിങ്ങൾ എന്തുകൊണ്ട് തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് പോയിട്ട് സെക്രട്ടേറിയറ്റിൽ ഒരു ധർണ നടത്തിക്കൂടാ?
എന്റെ അച്ഛാ, ഈ ലോക്ക്ഡൌണിന്റെ സാഹചര്യത്തിൽ നമ്മളെ വീട്ടിൽ നിന്ന് പോലും പുറത്തിറക്കത്തില്ല. പിന്നെ എങ്ങനെ നമ്മള് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി?
നിങ്ങൾക്ക് പോസ്റ്റ് കാർഡ് കിട്ടുമല്ലോ. എല്ലാവരും ഓരോ പോസ്റ്റ് കാർഡ് അയച്ചു നോക്ക് മുഖ്യമന്ത്രിക്കൊക്കെ. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കോടതിയിൽ കോടതി പറയല്ലോ. എല്ലാ സ്ഥലത്തും ഇപ്പൊ എന്താ പറയുന്നത്? കോടതി പോകണം എന്തെങ്കിലും നേടണമെങ്കിൽ കോടതി പറയും നിങ്ങൾ ചെയ്ത് തെറ്റാൻ. ഗവൺമെന്റ് വിഡിയോടാണ് കോടതി പറയുന്നത് യു ഹാവ് ഡൺ റോങ് എന്ന്. അതൊക്കെ നമുക്ക് ചിന്തിക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ? കോർട്ട് ഈസ് ഓൺലി സൊല്യൂഷൻ അവസ്ഥയിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ പോകുന്നത്. ബ്യൂറോക്രസി പൊളിച്ചു പോകുന്നു. ആർമി, പോലീസ് നമ്മളെ സഹായിക്കുന്നില്ല. കോടതിന് എത്ര കാലം നമുക്കിന്ന് വേണ്ടി നിൽക്കും? അപ്പൊ എല്ലാ ചെറിയ കാര്യത്തിനും കോടതി പോകാൻ പറ്റുമോ? അതായത് നമ്മുടെ ആളുകളുടെ, മലയാളികളുടെ പ്രത്യേകത എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഈ ലോകത്തിലുള്ള ആളുകൾ എല്ലാവരും കള്ളന്മാരാണ് നമ്മൾ ഒഴിച്ചെന്നുള്ള ധാരണയിലാണ്. ദിസ് ഈസ് ദ വേ ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് കറപ്ഷൻ കംസ്. നമുക്ക് കറപ്ഷൻ കണ്ടുപിടിച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അത് ഡീൽ ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഉപാധികളില്ല. നിയമം ഉണ്ടാവും, പക്ഷേ ഈ വിൽ ഹാവ് ഐദർ റിലീജിയസ് കോണ്ടാക്ട് ഓർ പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ കോണ്ടാക്ട്. അപ്പൊ രാഷ്ട്രീയവും മതവും ഒക്കെ കൊണ്ടാണ് നമ്മുടെ ഇവിടെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ മുഴുവൻ നടക്കുന്നത്. അത് മാറി ഒരു സെക്യുലർ കാഴ്ചപ്പാട് നമുക്കുണ്ടോ? മനുഷ്യനാണ് ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ്, നിയമം ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് ആണ്, ഹ്യൂമൻ ഡിഗ്നിറ്റിയാണ് ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ്. അങ്ങനെയുള്ളൊരു കൾച്ചർ ഉണ്ടാവണമെങ്കിൽ ഇന്റലക്ച്വൽ ആളുകൾ മുന്നോട്ട് വരണം. നമ്മുടെ കവികളും ഒക്കെ എന്തെങ്കിലും വരുമ്പോൾ ഒരു പ്രസ്താവന നടത്തുന്നതല്ലാതെ ആരും പുറത്തിറങ്ങില്ല. മനസ്സിലായോ? എന്തെങ്കിലും ഇഷ്യൂ ഉണ്ടായി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഓടുന്ന ആളുകളാണ്. പിന്നെയും കുറച്ചിറക്കത്ത് കുറച്ച് രാഷ്ട്രീയക്കാട്ടിലെ പിള്ളേരാണ്. അപ്പൊ ആ രീതിയിൽ നമുക്ക് നമ്മളുടെ ഈ കോൺസെപ്റ്റ് തന്നെ മാറണം. ഹയർ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ആരുടെ ഔദാര്യമല്ല. നമ്മുടെ ബുദ്ധി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നമ്മളുടെയാണ്, നമ്മുടെ സ്വന്തമാണ്. ദാറ്റ് വി മസ്റ്റ് ഡെവലപ്പ് ഫുള്ളി. ദൈവം തന്ന ഏറ്റവും വലിയ ഗുണം മനുഷ്യൻ കിട്ടിയിരിക്കുന്ന ബുദ്ധിയാണ്. ആ ബുദ്ധി ഉപയോഗിച്ചിട്ട് നമുക്ക് കാര്യങ്ങളെ വിശകലനം ചെയ്യാനും അതിനെ മനസ്സിലാക്കാനും അതിനോട് ക്രിയാത്മകമായിട്ട് പ്രതികരിക്കാനും നമുക്ക് സാധിക്കണം. അതിനെയാണ് നമ്മളുടെ മനുഷ്യത്വം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ,
ഫാദർ.
I think nobody else has questions now. 1 മണിക്കൂർ കഴിഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടാണ്. It's 1 hour is too long for people to sit in the visual. Okay. So if there is no question, thank you very much, Anand and Anna and Father Jolie.
Thank you, Father, for clarifying everybody's doubt so patiently. So, Father, can we go to next part?
Yes, sure. I think that's enough. Yeah. Maybe you can also ask question when you want at any time. Okay. Preeti, okay. Anthony. Okay.
Okay, Father.
Sure.
So
go
next
ahead,
okay, Father. So next I call upon Father Anish Varghese Kapil for delivering vote of thanks.
Hi, Good evening to each one gathered in this online platform for this webinar. I, Anish Varghese, first year MSW student of St. Albert's College, on behalf of our faculty and our college, express our sincere gratitude to each one of you present here. First and foremost, I acknowledge and thank Reverend Father Joey James, the resource person of the day. Dear Father, we are grateful to you for accepting our invitation and spending your time, knowledge, and experience with us. Dear Father, on behalf of our faculty and our college, I extend our gratitude to you. Thank you, Father.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome. Yes.
Everything else. And also, we are really honored for the presence and support of our dear Father Jolly Janodathingal, HOD, and Ashwin sir, and all other members of the staff for your support and presence during this webinar. Thank you, dear professors. I also extend our gratefulness to the organizers and participants of this webinar. Your hard work and your time spent for this webinar is never a waste. It is always a great achievement in the life of many people. Thanks to all for making this webinar successful and memorable. Wish you all a bright future and a good day in ahead. Stay safe. God bless you all. Thank you.